Hello. This is AS speaking. The following isn't channeled at all. They're just my own thoughts as the Earth human who channels all these messages, and my own experiences when talking with Pleiadians since 2020. I'm writing this partly to express my perspective in response to some of the backlash against my latest article, Hakann, the Grey Hats have failed. So it's best to read that article before this one. However, I also think that this writing may be interesting as a standalone piece. Of course, what I'll be writing is my perspective. Naturally, you're free to disagree with me. To start, everyone always seems to forget that technically the galactics don't owe us anything, and in fact we should probably be grateful that they're helping us at all. Someone might argue we on Earth deserve help, and maybe so. On the other hand, starving children in some parts of Africa deserve help too, and those of us who could easily donate enough money to save some lives there, frequently simply don't do that, and we also don't feel that we should be forced to help those children. Even though, from the point of view of some of those starving African children, some of us Westerners are so well off that we should have a moral obligation to help them. Well, similarly, I don't think that you can say that any individual galactic person should be obligated to help us. Make no mistake, the positive galactics are taking some casualties too, although usually they're beating the negative galactics they're fighting without casualties. I have an upcoming channeling from a female Pleiadian squad commander, roughly a sergeant in Earth terms. She was helping us Earth humans but got captured by reptilians. She was raped and tortured by them for about a month before she was freed. That was an absolutely horrific experience, and she still has some mental scars from that today despite Pleiadian healing technology. And the only reason that happened to her was that she was trying to help us, Earth humans. Hence, I think we can certainly ask for help and make suggestions, but I don't think that we should yell at the galactics. I don't think we should act like the galactics are obligated to help, much less obligated to help us in exactly the way we wish them to help us. Now yes, I want help too, and I want the galactics to land too, preferably today. I have repeatedly asked them to help us and to physically meet us. And they genuinely are planning to do so at this point. Second, a lot of people have in their mind that these galactics are basically perfect beings, and that any channeled message that portrays them as less than perfect is therefore a false message. I consider this galactics are perfect idea to just be wishful thinking. I get the appeal in thinking that these flawless, perfect beings are looking out for us and will soon walk among us, but that's like a small child idolizing his parents to an unrealistic degree. The truth is, while the galactics are good and are trying to help and are pretty awesome, they're not perfect. If they were perfect, they would have merged back into Source already. Or maybe they'd be part of some non-physical ET collective. They wouldn't be some physical man or woman somewhere, who probably still needs a spaceship to get around. The Tunias and Hakanns of the world, the kind of galactics who are actually going to land in the future, aren't perfect beings. And it's not just that they're imperfect, they also think a bit differently than we do. To illustrate this, how different do you think you are from an average Westerner from the 10th century? Quite different, right? I'm not a medieval expert, but I believe that most 10th century people dedicate their life to living in a good enough way so that they may enter heaven. Being unable to read, they probably view the local priest as someone who speaks for God, and they obey priests more or less blindly. The 10th century person might very well believe that their king was appointed by God, and that his rule is legitimate as a result. The 10th century person probably thinks that it's legitimate that there are different social classes, something that we might consider to be immoral. This person has a concept of honor that we would consider strange. They may also very well sleep in 2 blocks, sleep for 4 hours, be awake for a few hours, sleep for 4 more hours. Also, nationalism didn't really exist yet as we think of it today. It was more about people of one faith being a group that occasionally fought against other people from another faith. Okay, so we've established that you probably think quite a bit differently than 10th century people from Earth do. Well, then obviously humans from an entirely different planet and an entirely different level of development, Pleiadians, are also going to think differently than you do. Right? People tend to implicitly assume that Pleiadians have the same basic worldview that 21st century spiritually inclined Westerners do. The assumption is that they're prettier and more loving and more developed than us, but otherwise they think just like us. Well, they don't think just like us. That's just wishful thinking, or perhaps an everyone else is just like me naive assumption or something. Now, to be clear, they genuinely are kind and pleasant to be around. They're not secretly evil and they're not hiding some dark monstrous secret. I'm still genuinely excited to meet them. But yes, they do think a bit differently than we do. You know how time seems to speed up when you get older? Well, these people are often centuries old. So the way they think of 2 years is the way you probably think of 2 months. So from their point of view, them promising to intervene in the next 2 years is actually them promising to help really quickly. Because of their longer lifespan, they're also much more concerned than we are about potentially destabilizing longer-term consequences of their possible intervention than we are. We're basically just thinking about the present and the next 2 years or so. Well, they're trying to do what's best for Earth humans over the next 2 millennia or so. They're not as biased as we are towards the Earth humans who happen to be alive right now. They also try to do what's best for the Earth humans who will be born in the future. Then they might be considering things that I don't fully understand, like their intervention's impact on different timelines and different realities and different worlds and different galaxies and different collective consciousnesses, and it's almost like we're a child yelling at an adult. Yes, I too want to meet the galactics today, and yes, it's possible that it would be optimal for them to land today. However, I'm also open to the possibility that maybe the Galactic Confederation Dutch Science makers are just simply right to let a bit more time pass before meeting us. I don't have the perspective or knowledge necessary to be able to judge their decisions. It's possible that they even perceive time in a way that I don't understand, so how can I say that they're wrong and I'm right? We accuse them of not understanding our perspective, but we probably understand their perspective even less. In fact, it's hard for them to even communicate their full perspective to us because our thinking and consciousness and language is limited, from their perspective. On to the next point. Yes, the Pleiadians are what we would consider to be naive about the situation on Earth. They've lived in a sort of paradise for a long time now. As a result, they are, from our perspective, naive about darkness and evil people. That might be the greatest flaw that Pleiadians have. I know people may not like to hear this, and people love to pedestalize these beings. However, Pleiadians aren't perfect, and in fact they are naive, in the same way that you're probably naive about what being in a war really is like. Of course, if you have been in a war, this doesn't apply to you, and my heart goes out to you. Some people have argued that the galactics should simply have listened to people like Hakann and that should have solved their naivete. Well, suppose that you're a person who has never been in a war. You can listen to someone who has been in a war describe it. You can watch war movies. But you won't fully understand war. You won't fully understand what it's like to live in a war zone until you've experienced it yourself. Similarly, the galactics have tried to do their research about what life on Earth is like, and that has helped, but they're still somewhat naive about it. The galactics genuinely have tried to research the situation on Earth as best as they could, and they have listened to people like Hakann. If they hadn't, they would have been ever more naive and they would probably have adopted a policy of we're purely just going to send love towards Earth and that will be enough to cause the people of Earth to peacefully unite. And if you want to argue that this is what they're currently doing, it's really not. Without their practical help things would be far worse today. They have dealt with a lot of hostile ETs, they have solved a lot of hard to deal with problems for us and they have averted a lot of disasters. It's just hard to notice the 5 huge disasters that didn't happen last year. But, yes, they are naive. They are imperfect. We should probably stop pedestalizing other people and other beings, including the galactics. After all, we're the ones we've been waiting for. The Pleiadians aren't the ones we've been waiting for, we're the ones we've been waiting for. They sure can help us and interacting with them is certainly going to be enjoyable, but it's probably better to think of them as a wiser yet imperfect older brother, and not as some kind of perfect savior. If you don't believe that the galactics are naive and imperfect, use some common sense. It's clear that the Pleiadians are able to intervene if they wish. Any highly advanced beings who can fly UFOs in our skies at will should be able to intervene if they wished, right? And to me, it's obvious that the Pleiadians are fundamentally good-hearted. If everyone was secretly evil, then World War III would have started already. So then, why haven't they intervened already? And don't just say they should have, maybe so, but why haven't they? Well, my explanation for why they haven't intervened is what I've been writing here. Namely, they have a broader perspective than we do, and also they're a bit naive. If you reject this explanation, then what's your explanation for why they haven't landed yet? I think any explanation other than what I shared can easily be refuted just by thinking logically about it. There's the saying, when you have eliminated all which is impossible, then whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. Or in this situation, we're observing that the Pleiadians haven't yet landed, intervened, and they must have some reason for that. You can't just say that every single reason for this is fake and false, because then why haven't they landed yet? They must have some reason for that, from their perspective. And if you think about it logically, then I think that what I've channeled, they have a broader view and they're a bit naive, is the position that's easiest to defend. Or do you want to argue that highly advanced beings who are flying around in our skies all the time are somehow literally unable to just land? While we think they're being naive, the Pleiadians have for a long time thought that eventually we will simply just stand up and free ourselves, and they're not wrong that if enough people do that, we will get our freedom. The Pleiadians are currently coming around to the understanding that it's apparently not so easy on Earth, but to this day they're a bit baffled why more people aren't out there protesting and peacefully demanding their freedom. From their point of view, if we just work together for a bit, we could free ourselves in 1 week and have a much better society in 1 year, so why don't we? Pleiadians are constantly mind-reading each other and communicating telepathically, so it's hard for them to understand why we're not simply working together to achieve this. They don't quite grasp the isolation we're in. And it's really hard for them to wrap their mind around the fact that it's not just that normal people aren't standing up, also more or less every single person who has sworn an oath to defend the Constitution, the people is currently violating that oath. At least, that's the Pleiadian perspective on that. This is something that just doesn't quite compute in the mind of an average Pleiadian. They figured that even if the people don't peacefully stand up, then surely the military would step in to defend the Constitution, defend the people, because they swore an oath to do so. Furthermore, some Pleiadians view us as not much better than the reptilians. If you're shocked by this, well, the way that Earth humans treat animals isn't that much better from how reptilians treat us. Yes, I know that mistreating humans isn't quite the same as mistreating animals, and hence Pleiadians also don't view us as quite so bad as reptilians. But still. Yes, there are good Earth humans, but then again there are also good reptilians. Yes, the humans who mistreat animals were hurt during their childhood, but do you think reptilians don't get hurt during their childhoods? Some Pleiadians are a bit baffled by why Earth humans are asking for our freedom while engaging in factory farming ourselves, with most of us not really making an effort to end the practice of factory farming on Earth. And yes, that is how Pleiadians who haven't studied Earth often think. If Earth humans disagree with factory farming, why aren't they just connecting with other Earth humans who feel the same and then together creating a movement that ends that practice? Next up, Pleiadians genuinely view suffering mostly as just another experience and possibly an opportunity for growth. Now, yes, I know that's easy for them to say, but still, that's how they feel. I one time telepathically chatted with a spiritually advanced Pleiadian who one time just out of curiosity and out of wanting a new experience, took an advanced knife and cut off her own arm, and then had it reattached by a healer. She wasn't mentally ill or stressed, she just desired to have that experience. Pleiadians really have a much different relationship with pain and suffering than we do. For them, what's desirable are new experiences and soul growth, not comfort or pleasure or an end to suffering. The thing they're trying to avoid isn't suffering, the thing they're trying to avoid is spending a century just having a bunch of empty pleasure and empty comfort that doesn't ultimately lead to any kind of soul growth or expansion. Which is also why a small minority of Pleiadians is genuinely open to dating Earth humans. Interacting with us is like a golden opportunity to get soul growth for them, and they really value soul growth very highly. Not to mention that some Pleiadians really like our energy. I suspect that if you offered an average Pleiadian the opportunity to live on Earth for a year, they'd immediately and excitedly accept. Now, the wiser Pleiadians understand at least a bit just how dark Earth is. However, an average Pleiadian might view us, and not themselves, as the privileged ones because we're getting so much soul growth. And we genuinely are. Remember that the vast majority of beings who wanted to be born on Earth were rejected. We're the lucky lotto winners that we even get to be here at all. I know that's not how most of us feel, but still, most of us, or possibly all of us, did sign up for this. So, to summarize, Pleiadians aren't just pretty and kind-hearted versions of 21st century spiritual Westerners. They genuinely think a bit differently than we do, which is only logical when you consider that they come from a different planet and a much different culture. They are a bit naive about the situation on Earth, but then again, we also don't quite grasp their millennia-long and intergalactic perspective, so I would be a bit hesitant about labeling their actions as flat-out wrong. That said, yes, I too want them to land as quickly as possible, and have repeatedly made that request. I think there's a high chance, though no guarantee, that they'll make open contact in 2024 or 2025. Also, someone in the comment section interpreted my earlier messages as the galactics saying, "Grey hats, take action in 2023, or if you don't we will immediately intervene ourselves." I can understand that interpretation and maybe the galactics should have been clearer there. However, if you carefully read my previous messages, they never actually said that they would intervene immediately. They were always talking about an intervention before the end of 2025 or before the end of 2026. To them, the Grey Hats not taking action in 2023 gives further legitimacy for the galactics to take action when they wish, but they're still going to take action when they think that's best, and that will be somewhere this year or the next year. Part 2, Some Anecdotes. For the second part of my message, let me just share a few anecdotes about my interactions with Pleiadians. I've never physically met them, but I have telepathically communicated with them a lot. Sometimes they travel in their energy body to my room and sometimes I travel in my energy body to meet them. Now that I'm writing this message, I figured I might as well share these anecdotes. Hopefully they're interesting or amusing to you. A big part of their romantic and sexual attraction is based on if they like someone's energy. Pleiadians can have their bodies reshaped if desired, so physical attributes aren't the primary consideration when choosing a partner. They're using energy much more consciously than we are. To them, it's almost like we're missing a limb because we're not using energy consciously. Energy is also a major part of their communication, and it's strange to them that we don't consciously use energy to convey information, which in most cases they consider to be more accurate and quicker and enjoyable than using words. So from their point of view, our form of communication is archaic, slow and inaccurate. Pleiadians can talk and can psychically send images or words to someone else. However, if a Pleiadian wishes to communicate something to another Pleiadian, then typically they just send energy to convey that message, and that energy isn't a word and isn't an image. I've at times asked how they would refer to something in their normal way of communication, and the Pleiadians reply by sending me energy that I do sense, but it's not a word and not an image. Basically my brain receives something but it doesn't know how to interpret what it's receiving. It's not even that I'm hearing a foreign language, it's more that I'm getting a kind of signal or input that's new to me. It's not painful or scary, but it is kind of weird and hard to make sense of. I imagine if I was born in Pleiadian society, my Pleiadian parents would keep sending me energy until I understood that language. How Pleiadians often communicate with me is that they send me energy, however it's energy that's in some ways pre-chewed or specifically made understandable for me, for Earth humans, so that my brain actually can interpret it. So it's not that they're literally sending me words, it's that they're sending me a pre-chewed package of energy that my brain then translates to words, and sometimes they correct me, saying that my brain's translation of what they sent me isn't accurate. Often they send me energy, and my brain says a sentence out loud, word for word, in my mind. Then I listen to the words being said out loud in my mind, and that's how I understand the sentence. Recently I've sometimes been able to interpret a statement by a Pleiadian at the speed of thought. In other words, previously, I would receive energy and my mind would go love is important, sounding out the words one by one in my mind. Nowadays I'm sometimes able to just receive the energy and have love is important flash through my mind at the speed of thought. They congratulated me on this and compared it to a person who can now read quietly and doesn't have to read by reading every single word out loud. On to the next anecdote. A big part of why most people have poor self-knowledge is that they're in an unsafe and emotionally unsafe environment, and people's lack of self-knowledge keeps them safe or gives them an advantage. Pleiadians don't have that, and their self-knowledge is pretty great as a result. For example, if two Pleiadians have a discussion about should we get into a relationship, they're often extremely clear to themselves and to each other what they expect from the other person, how long it is until they plan to reincarnate, and under which circumstances they'll leave the relationship. They also prioritize the well-being of children highly. They genuinely do so, as opposed to Earth humans who sometimes do so but also sometimes only say they do while actually prioritizing themselves above their children, which is pretty horrifying to Pleiadians. I haven't confirmed this, but I'm hypothesizing that having a large amount of self-knowledge is people's natural state. It's just that on Earth, everyone, even just due to the energies, is pushed into the defense mechanism of inner fragmentation and lack of self-knowledge for the purposes of keeping yourself safe and keeping you feeling relatively good about yourself. Next up, being mind readers, privacy is a more or less foreign concept to Pleiadians. They understand it rationally, but to them that's just lonely and a bit sad, and an indication that the person desiring privacy apparently isn't in a safe and emotionally safe environment. They're used to being mind-read by their brothers and sisters all the time, which makes them feel seen and understood and loved. Because Pleiadian society is so emotionally safe, they also have no problem with admitting fault, as Hakann did last week. I've seen a so-called fantasy creature being physically present on one of their ships, but was asked not to publicly share which one it is. They also don't like to think of animals as pets they own, instead they think of them as a companion who happens to be an animal. I heard one time of a fairly average Pleiadian woman play wrestling with a literal bear and not being concerned for her safety, so these animal companions seem to be tame in some way, or the woman could communicate well with the bear in some way, or maybe she just had a really good personal shield or something. Pleiadians are communal and often spend most of their time in a relatively small community, group, tribe, where everyone knows everyone. Of course, they can change tribes as desired. Galactic special forces have been physically active on the surface of Earth for at least several years now. The average Earth human has more raw psychic potential and raw psychic talent than the average Pleiadian, however we often have all kinds of inner blocks preventing us from using that. Even those of us who are partially psychically unblocked are still untrained and unrefined. Sometimes Pleiadians use singing as a way of emotionally supporting someone or offering light emotional healing. They think sounds, especially sounds consciously combined with energy, are an underutilized healing modality here on Earth. Some of them are also quite good at using sexual healing techniques, not just to heal sexual trauma but also to heal all sorts of things, with consent on both sides being necessary, of course. The average spiritual person won't be able to do the following, however if you're very skilled at working with energy and sensing energy, you can travel in your energy body to a Pleiadian ship. Or you can have some Pleiadian travel down to you in their energy body. Then you can, for example, hug their energy body with your energy body. It's not quite a physical hug, but it still feels nice. I'm currently single and most nights I go to sleep cuddling with the energy body of a Pleiadian. I've never offended or emotionally hurt a Pleiadian in years of interacting with them, and at times I've been unreasonable. They don't get triggered easily, or take things personally easily. For example, one time I was talking with a Pleiadian woman whose energy body was in my room, but who physically was somewhere else. I could see her body in my mind's eye, and she was beautiful. A thought arose in me about me touching her breasts. I didn't consciously send the thought to her, but the thought arose in me, and she read it in my mind. Immediately, without being offended or embarrassed, she said that I was free to touch her breasts if I wanted, but to please not touch her between her legs. Basically, her attitude was, I'm not attracted to you, but hey, I understand you've never touched Pleiadian energy boobies before, so go ahead if you want. To me that illustrates that they're mind readers, but also they don't really judge or get offended, and they have good self-knowledge and clear boundaries. Obviously, not every Pleiadian woman will be okay with having her breasts touched. People are different and that goes for Pleiadians too. Those were just the boundaries that this one particular woman had in this particular situation. If I think Tunia, then Tunia hears that, and might respond or just take a look at what's going on. So it's like the old idea that if you think someone's name, then they'll hear you, at least if you have a connection with them. I don't suspect that Tunia would register that some random person somewhere thinks her name. I've been told that it's possible for me to think Tunia in a way that Tunia wouldn't notice it, but I don't yet have that level of mind training, mental discipline, mental skill. Similarly, apparently you can block people from mind reading you, but I haven't mastered that. Of course you can also just ask to not be mind read and that wish will be respected. Pleiadians can just download information into their brain, so knowledge is like water to them. It's important but also so easily available that most of them aren't very concerned with knowledge for knowledge's sake. You're also not concerned with gathering water, right? Pleiadians do like it when they can contribute valuable new knowledge to the metaphorical knowledge pool though, at which point many beings will download it if they're interested. It's great to them if they can expand the metaphorical pool of knowledge that their entire race has access to. And yes, some Pleiadians can just pull information from thin air and don't need this metaphorical pool of knowledge, but not all Pleiadians can do that. Also, not every Pleiadian can teleport or bilocate, although some can. They're very emotionally intelligent, on top of being mind readers. One Pleiadian that I regularly interact with clearly understands me better than I understand myself. She's polite and wants to let me grow at my own pace, but if I ask, or if I clearly need it, she's capable of making a really deep and piercing observation about me that wouldn't have occurred to me. For example, I might overthink something and come up with some complex theory, and she just says something like, "My dear, you're feeling the way you do because you were hurt 10 years ago in this situation." And she's right, and what she says is so much simpler than the theory I was coming up with. On the other hand, the wiser Pleiadians realize that we have qualities that they don't have, such as experience in dealing with the dark, standing our ground in the face of adversity, etc., and so they genuinely don't see themselves as better than us. They just see us and them as having different qualities, and they think that we'll be able to learn from each other. Occasionally they're surprised that our tech is so primitive. Yesterday I put my groceries in my backpack, and the Pleiadian I was chatting with was surprised that my backpack didn't zip itself up. One Pleiadian was somewhat horrified that I used a sharp but still fairly normal table knife for eating, which she considered to be unreasonably dangerous. Same with me crossing the road in a situation that we would see as normal, but that to her was unreasonably dangerous. So, those were some observations from my time interacting with Pleiadians. I hope this was interesting. Regular channeling will continue next weekend. I've already received the next message and it's not another discussion about galactic intervention or Earth's likely future. I don't have any news on that front that I haven't shared already. Instead, next weekend's message will hopefully be helpful for people's personal spiritual growth. Have a good week. Your Earth Brother. A.S.